Welcome, Lyman, to Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
We're doing great. Mike, how about yourself?
Doing well. Thanks so much for coming on. Today, we're going to be talking about your work, your life, everything you have done, specifically about your health, right? Health is one of those things that many people take for granted until it is lost, until it is threatened, that doctor's note, or we get the bad news of diabetes, the big C word. And I know people want to avoid any health ailment as much as they can, but sometimes they're not doing the things that they can do every single day to make sure that they're in the best health. So we're going to be talking about all of that today, but without me telling the whole world about your story, who you are, what you have accomplished, please tell the world what you do and how you help them.
Well, thanks, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here on the podcast. I mean, in a nutshell, I sit here at 63. When I was 25 years old, a few years earlier, I'd started a running program to get in shape. I wasn't athletic as a kid, but at 25, I made a conscious decision to die healthy. The phrase that I used at the time was to square the curve. I had this vision of living my entire life in good health without disease or dysfunction. And then one day, far off into the future, maybe at the age of 110 or 120, going to sleep and not waking up the next day after having done something fun and enjoyable that day. I made that decision in part because I was on this fitness journey for myself, trying to get, sort of getting into the running lifestyle. But that really branched into a broader view of health. And in particular, what I was noticing was a lot of ill health around me, specifically my parents and my grandparents. I wanted something better for myself. It's very unusual for a 25-year-old to be thinking about this, right? And this is the challenge that people have now, as you alluded to in your opening introduction. We kind of march along in life. We hope for the best. We're not always sure, perhaps, how much we can control how our the second half of our life plays out, or our health outcomes. No one really gets to choose how we're going to die. But the reality is that the science certainly shows us that, to a very large degree, the choices we make every day in terms of the food we eat, our mindset, which I know is an important topic for you, our mission and purpose in life, certainly the exercise we get, all of these things play a really important role in ultimately our health outcomes. The challenge for me here is, as I sit here as a health coach, and an aging specialist, really is to convince people that their choices really matter, that this idea that every decision I make may impact ultimately how things play out over the long term is challenging for so many reasons, obviously. But that's kind of been my path. I made that decision at 25. Every day since then, literally every day since then, again, I sit here at 63, I thought about how to become healthier, and also how to strike that balance between self-improvement and self-acceptance, which is a very delicate balance, right? Because it isn't about perfection. It's really about just trying to be a little bit better and realizing something which is incredibly profound, in my opinion, which is this: without good health, nothing else matters in life nearly as much. I mean, we know that Steve Jobs passed at 56 from pancreatic cancer with $7 billion of net worth. And he is well known to have said that he could pay someone to do absolutely anything for him, but he couldn't pay someone to be, sick for him. No matter how much money we have, and certainly the relationships and the connections that we have in life, those are so important, maybe the most important thing. The problem is when we're sick, when we're struggling, when we're in pain, when we're suffering with a disease, in what is an ironic twist, we end up becoming a burden to those people we least want to burden. Our own suffering begins to negatively impact those relationships, creates all kinds of different emotional triggers in everyone that is involved. In the end, it's about establishing a platform of good habits, tiny little rituals, little things that we can do every day to enhance our health and just try to take control. And then, of course, there's a little bit of mystery to it all. We hope for the best, but we've got to control what we can control.
You said something early on when you said something about the second life, like when you start the second life, you alluded to that. Was that second life something that you realized at 25, or was it something that you hit at a certain age?
That's a great question. I think when I think of the second half of my life, just speaking from a personal perspective, I think I've just entered it right now. And so, of course, I had this vision of living past 100. Although I will say for me, and certainly for the folks that I work with, the goal is less about lifespan and more about health span, which is defined really as the quality of the years. Because no one wants to live to be 110 if the last 30 years are spent in a convalescent home or suffering and in pain. So first and foremost, it's about the quality of those years. But I think, I don't know how old you are, Mike. I'm going to guess 25, 35.
35, yeah.
There we go. There are changes that happen. And I love it when I hear somebody who turns 40 that goes, oh man, when you turn 40, I'm like, you ain't saying nothing yet, pal. At 40, I think I did 3 Ironman races in the year I turned 40. And I felt like I was absolutely bulletproof. When you turn 50, though, you really notice changes start to occur. And many of them are out of your control. Maybe a few more wrinkles, maybe a little bit more sagging skin. Maybe your hair starts to thin, those kinds of things. Of course, when you hit 60, now that rate at which the changes start to occur really goes up, sometimes even almost exponentially. And I'm guaranteeing that there are people out there that if there's someone listening right now that's 70, they're going, oh, Al, you haven't seen anything, man. Wait till you get to 70. So I think the thing is, in my mind, I always thought about this idea that as I looked around me, and by the way, this became super obvious to me during COVID, which is what made me sit down and decide to write my book, which I had been talking about for many years. But COVID just really brought all this to the fore in my own mind. But the way I've always thought about it is, and this may seem maybe, I don't know, gruesome to some people, but I think if you think of it in this context, and that is that I think too many of us die slow, gradual deaths before our actual demise. Sometimes those deaths are cognitive in the form of some kind of dementia. Sometimes they're emotional, and they're expressed in terms of some severe loneliness and isolation because of some perhaps health-related issue. Maybe they're related to some type of mental illness. And then, of course, there are the functional deaths. That is the loss of the ability to move around freely, to participate in life. I mean, I have this vision in my mind. I've got a 5-year-old grandson. His name is Theo. And whenever I visit Theo, they live quite a ways from me. But whenever I visit, I'm going to see him this weekend. It's going to be my goal to race him across the yard, and I'm going to try to beat him every time. And I know that probably by the time he gets to be in the 5th grade, I'm not going to be able to keep up with him anymore. But I had this vision of like racing Theo, like there's this grandfather racing him across the grassy field and, playing a game, just participating, maybe being there absolutely for Theo's wedding day, should he decide to become, married, or maybe if they, he and his future wife have children, being there for the birth of that, what would be a great grandchild, and not just being there, Mike, but participating, right? Because really my message is this simple idea that the memories that we create with those that we love and that we care about, those memories are what matter the most. My dad, as an example, passed more than, I guess, 22 years ago now, at a year older than I am right now. And in my book, I have a couple of pictures of my dad. I dedicated the book to him, but there's a picture, and it's a picture of him at 59, and he literally looks like he's probably 75. My dad lived a hard life. He was blue collar, and I always say that he did the best he could with what he knew at the time. And I think many of that generation didn't really know what we know today. But the bottom line is my son, my daughter, my grandchildren, there's just so many experiences, memories that haven't been created because my dad is gone. And that saddens me. That's my passion, sort of my mission, to share this message of just do the best that you can and try to take control. And if you can do that, then at least you give yourself the best chance.
We look at what's happening with parents, especially today. People are having children at a later age. They're not having kids at 18, 19, 20 anymore. It's like 30, 35. It's a different lifestyle because you have built your career. You're most likely established, but you're a little bit older. And sometimes people, when they have a career focus, they put health on the back burner. They might not be in the best shape. They might not be in the best mindset. When they do have kids, they have maybe a couple years of being able to run with them, play with them, and then they can't keep up. I'm not sure if you saw a video. It's an older video now, probably like 6, 7 months old now, where there was a lady taking her infant out of the car, and the infant was in a stroller. The parent was obese. And what happened was, I guess the parent tripped or something, and the kid started to roll down the hill into oncoming traffic. Now, the parent tried to get up, but parent couldn't get up in time. Luckily, there was a bystander who saw what was going on, dashed over, stopped the stroller from going into the oncoming traffic. And that's just right. Looking at that, that should be a wake-up call for people, not even parents, but everyone. You never know when you have to take action. You never know when you have to show up. And it's so important that we look at our health as something that can save someone's lives, not just our own. And when we give ourselves the purpose like that, then we can give ourselves more drive, more focus. Then we can have a more purposeful life, right, of fulfillment. But yet many people just take a bystander approach to health and fitness. If we had an opportunity today to look at our health and our fitness, what would be the first step someone can do at any age to begin to implement better health processes in their life?
Well, that's a great question. I think it really starts, and my background is exercise, by the way, and fitness. With that in mind, I'll say that I really believe the most important element when we're looking at our health and certainly our rate of aging is the food that we eat. Unfortunately, we live now in a culture where big food, as I refer to them, industrialized processed food has become absolutely ubiquitous and embedded into our culture, and it's everywhere. And the messages are constant to eat, eat, eat everywhere we go. I think the very first thing that someone could do is to try to reduce the amount of processed foods in their diet. I've got 7 chapters about nutrition in my book, but if someone asks me, what's your single most important advice? Eat real food, just real food. I mean, just as an example, I can have a ribeye right here and, just pulled it off the grill. It doesn't have a very long list of ingredients. It's a slab of beef. Juxtapose that with, who knows, a package pulled from somewhere in the center of the grocery store that's got a very long list of ingredients and is designed to last a very long time. So I would say it starts with eating real food and trying to make tiny choices. This is so important. And I know with your focus on mindset is this idea, I say it over and over in the book, that the real key to success starts with consistency. And the only way to be consistent is to make a change that's so small, it's almost imperceptible, but yet be consistent with it. You might make one, say, habit that you have going to a certain kind of food on a routine basis. Just don't do that. Get that food out of your environment. Make that commitment. It's a tiny choice. It's only one choice in your entire day. Just make that, but then stick to that and turn that into a new habit. Don't try to add more habits to it. Don't try to also make a change at 2 or 3 or 4 other meal times during the day. Because now I think the chance, while that's all certainly idealistically, it's a great way, like just, completely overhaul your diet. But that just sets people up for failure because at some point when for one reason or another, they're not able to execute those strategies, they feel like they've fallen off the wagon. They get down on themselves. That inner critic kicks up and says, you suck. Why are you doing this? You ain't worth it. Things are just going to be the way they're going to be. Why are you trying to change yourself? You know what I mean? It's just this messaging, simple, actionable changes in habit, one tiny little thing. For someone who's used to sitting on the couch or in a chair most of the time, maybe 5 minutes of walking is a significant change in their activity level. Now, it's not going to sound a lot to somebody who's used to running 20 miles a week or who rides their bike an hour a day or goes to the gym for an hour. But for that person to get up and walk for 5 minutes straight could be significant. And if that's all they do, and if they back that up every day, then they're going to generate some momentum and they're going to improve how they feel and they're going to feel better about themselves. And the odds of them keeping that going, developing a string that they're not going to want to break. So then there's this idea that action is what drives motivation. It isn't motivation that just falls down on us like pixie dust. We're waiting for this magic thing to happen. No, take a little bit of action, so small, almost imperceptible, and then build on that and let that momentum turn into motivation, because that's in all of us, man. That's part of our humanity. We all want to be better. But again, we're fighting these inner messages, our own inner critic, and also the noise that surrounds us. As I talk about in the book, I mean, there are so many reasons, to your point earlier about someone who's, say, 35. My daughter, for example, is 36, right? She works at a very high management level in a large corporation. There's Theo and also Josie, who's now 7 or 8 months old. She is stressed, right? Trying to figure out how to balance her day. Everybody's working. It's like, man, I don't even know if I can figure out how to get through my day. I know that's how she thinks. What we've got to do when you combine that with apathy and confusion about all the messaging that we hear in the media, every expert saying something different, it all, I think, can cause us to freeze and then just not take action. Tiny little changes. And I say that being someone who's done 9 Ironman triathlons, who have spent my entire life chasing accomplishments. But I think in a way, those accomplishments are a trap, right? Because it isn't about those things. It's much more about these simple habits, these simple changes that over time allow us. I guess the key here is it's about the journey, man, right? It's about the process. It's about all of these little changes over time that turn into a series of continuous goals that drive us every day versus some accomplishment or some big goal that may be down the road. I think that's part of the key.
And when we start to look at the mindset, you said something early on. You said we die before we really do meet our demise. Our mindset is telling us that we're old, we have some problems, some health problems. And if you believe at 90, you're 40, right? You're gonna do that. You're gonna still be the ballerina. You're still gonna be going to the grocery store. You're gonna be doing everything you're supposed to be doing or you have been doing. It's just because you have that mindset. A quick story. My father, he had a heart attack at age 54. He was an alcoholic, kept drinking. We tell him, don't drink that. Kept drinking, right? Heart attack happens. He gets a stroke. What happens is, he loses functionality of half his body. He has to go to therapy. He's able to make some recovery, almost 100%, but of course, he's not the same. Having a hard time moving and just becoming active. And he was always just taking a passive approach to health and fitness. Oh, I'll do it later. I'll do it later. It was always another day. And then we have the fallacy of time, right? People think, oh, I have time, right? I'll do it another day. I'll do it when I feel a little bit better. When he had that, I remember I called him. I said, you have grandkids. I don't know what age you want to live to, but do you want to be able to run with them? Do you want to be able to watch them graduate from schools? Do you want to be able to take pictures when they're going down the aisle to get married? What do you want? He wasn't thinking about that. He was just pitying himself, where he was just, woe me, woe me. And it wasn't until I gave him a bigger purpose, he started to become more active and more resilient. That's an amazing mindset to have when you can look at something, not just for you, but for memory's sake. As you said, we want the memories. We want to build and create those memories. It's not so much of how much money we spend, but how many memories we can create. And I think that's where the joys of health come in, because if you are healthy, your memories are going to be so much better. You can walk on the beach with them. You could run with them. And that's going to be so much more sweet than, just looking at a picture and then that's it, or FaceTiming them because you really can't walk well. And I'm not saying that, of course, with age, things start to break down a little bit easier, more quicker, but it doesn't mean that we have to have that logic and say, well, I'm 70 years old. It makes sense that I can't walk anymore. No, 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 no. If you're 70 years old, what can we do to be the best walkers, right? Maybe we do have to start to give ourselves an accomplishment, a challenge of doing an Ironman. It's not that we need to do it, but the mind is so powerful. If you give it a challenge, it shows up. And many people at a certain age, it seems like they stop challenging themselves. They stop saying, you know what? I'm going to be more than what I am today. They just find like a place of complacency. What happens with wolves that are older, they just find a little hole and they die. They separate themselves from the pack and they just go someplace and die. Mentally, our culture today, that's what they do. Now, they physically don't die. They'll get their DoorDash and their McDonald's and their Burger King delivered so they have some sustenance to sustain themselves. But mentally, they're gone. How can we start to invigorate life back into those individuals?
Well, it's funny. When you were talking, I thought about one of my favorite authors is Kindra Hall. She wrote a book, Choose Your Story, Choose Your Life. And I reference it a few times in my book, but she often says, where the mind goes, the body will follow. In the epilogue to my book, Mike, and this is no reference to Simon Sinek, but in the epilogue, I kind of wrap this whole idea of what my message is to those readers by asking the question, what's your why? And also asking the two more questions. The second is, what matters more, your fear or your hopes? I think those are important questions that really speak to exactly what you talked about, because until your dad had a real reason that motivated him to look inside himself and question, the kind of person he wants to be for those that he loves and that love him, that why becomes incredibly important, because in the end, it's what drives us. In the epilogue, I tell the story of this German Christmas commercial. I'm sure you've seen it at some point. It's one of my favorite 90 seconds of video that I've ever seen. It's this old man and his alarm is going off and he gets himself out of bed very early in the morning and he sort of trudges into the garage and drags a kettlebell across the floor and tries to pick it up. And he's unable to pick it up and he's grunting and groaning. And this goes on for a number of days. And the neighbors are kind of looking at him like, what's going on? And he's really, and he just keeps working at it and working at it. One of the neighbors finally calls his daughter, who comes over. And the only spoken word in the entire commercial is when she looks at him and she goes, Papa? Like they can't figure out what he's doing as he tries to pick up this kettlebell every single day. And there are moments when he's looking at himself in the mirror and you can tell he's contemplating and thinking about it. And he's got this little picture of this little girl that sits there on his nightstand. And then finally at the end of this 90-second commercial, he gets himself into a suit and tie, sort of fixing himself up in the mirror. And he takes this package, Christmas gift, and he goes to visit his daughter. And as he's standing in the middle of the room, his granddaughter is coming down the stairs and she smiles and he smiles. And then you quickly realize what this was all about. The package, the gift is for her. It's a star. And he grabs her by the waist and lifts her up so that she can put the star on the top of the tree. And everyone is crying, tears falling down their face, and just thinking about this moment. It's an incredibly powerful little film that really, in my mind, describes what was so important to this old man, that he was willing to grind every day in the garage and get himself up. At the end of the day, for each of us, there's a touch of discipline, which I believe is perhaps the most profound and important expression of self-love, this idea of self-discipline. But there's a little taste of that, but there's also this taste of what is more important, your hopes or your fears? What is ultimately driving you toward the decisions that you make? Are you hopeful for the future, or have you simply given up? I mean, Mike, I know you wake up every day. If you look yourself in the mirror and if you say, there's no hope for tomorrow, there's no hope for our country, there's no hope for me or my family, then Your ability to continue on with your day with any ability to generate anything positive, of course, completely goes out the window. Hope is the linchpin for everything that happens. You've got to wake up every day and revisit that, keep finding new ways to be hopeful. And part of that is creating it within us, how we think about things, and also our belief system. You mentioned earlier talking about this idea of how someone thinks of themselves at 70. In my book, there are 2 chapters on age beliefs and aging stereotypes. I personally hate the phrase anti-aging because to me, it at the same time that it seems to, in a way, glorify youthfulness, it also sets up this idea that aging in and of itself is a bad thing. It's not. It's a natural chapter in our life. For me personally, I sit here at 63. My worst days, I wish I was 35 again. But the other thing that I always come back to is this is the chapter of my life where I am now. I have wisdom and experience now that I never had at 30. I didn't even know what I didn't know at 35, as an example. So I think for all of us, we need to find the best ways to embrace those chapters in our life. It isn't about trying to be something else other than we are. We just want to be the best version of ourselves in whatever chapter we're at, right? I think chapter 4 is really about how to rewrite the narrative in our minds and begin to understand that how we talk to ourselves about ourselves is how we create the life that we really want to live. And of course, that's at the end of the day, it's largely about the action we take, but action never happens without belief, first and foremost, without some semblance of a why, some feeling of hopefulness, and then our ability to believe in the power of our choices. You talked earlier about the mind and how powerful the mind is. And I'll tell you, man, when I researched this book and certainly what I've learned over the course of my life, I don't think there's any doubt that we can completely change our health with our mindset, with how we think, first and foremost. In fact, it's essential because at the end of the day, what we manifest physically, emotionally, in the end, comes out of what goes on in our mind, the thoughts that we have. So it's all really interrelated and integrated in a very important way.
And we talked about so many great things in our conversation today, from starting off with health, understanding the difference between improvement and acceptance. But then the last little bit, we talked about the concept of hope. And we do have to have some hope. We do have to have some type of why in our life, some type of purpose, as we said today. And when you can do that, you're going to start to take more action. And sometimes you have to get some skin in the game. Sometimes you have to reach out to someone, get a coach, get a mentor, get a guide, get a book that's going to just be that last spark in your life that's going to make everything different. I always say the book that changed your life is not the book that changed your life. It's probably all the books that were subsequent to that book that changed your life. Because I can give someone a book that changed my life and they read it and nothing happened. We have to build. And as we build, we grow. Take an opportunity today to keep on building, gain the knowledge, gain the wisdom, and then start to take action. And before we go, I would love to get some final words from you, Al, and then to tell the audience where they can find you.
Thanks, Mike. First, the title of my book is Age Well and Feel Great, The Proven Path to Solving the Aging Puzzle and Going the Distance. It can be found at Amazon and also on my website, which is theallyman.com. Right on the website there, right above the fold, there's an opportunity for someone to just click a button and be taken to a page where they can learn a lot more about the latest coaching program I've launched, which is called B.E.A.T Aging. The word B.E.A.T being the acronym for belief, encouragement, accountability, and taking action. So that it's a transformation over the course of 12 weeks that really reflects what we've talked about today, which is that all of these elements, the ability for us to encourage ourselves and get encouragement from others in our support group, the necessity of having some kind of belief in the power of our choices. And then, of course, the accountability that's necessary, holding ourselves accountable for what we say we're going to do and having that support group or support person there for us. We all get here on the backs of those that come before us. Nobody does life solo. It definitely takes a team. And I think anybody who's ever achieved or accomplished anything, certainly your listeners right now that are listening, They know that anything that they've ever done required the support of teachers, mentors, coaches, partners, parents, siblings, and the list goes on and on. That's where folks can find me. And of course, Instagram, the Al Lyman, Twitter, Coach Al. I try to get on, as much social media as I can. And I find the conversations when they happen are really interesting and fascinating. And I guess the last little bit of wisdom that I would leave everybody with today is to really reiterate what I had mentioned before. And that is, nothing else matters without good health. So for every one of us, every single person, whether you're 35 or 45 or 75, we have to believe and know that it's never too late to make a change, and it never is. I don't care how old you are. You can make one positive change, which can ultimately impact the quality of your life, right? We can't know when our final day is here, but it's never too late to make a change. So we've all got to accept the fact that without good health, very little of the other things that keep us busy in the course of our lives, it doesn't matter quite as much without that good health. But as I said earlier, the key is not biting off too much. I know yourself, obviously a high achiever, you got all of your own coaching and the podcast and so many things going on. I don't know whether you have a family or children, but the bottom line is we all have so many tasks in our day that can grab our attention. But if we don't pay ourselves first, if we don't take care of the temple, which is our body, our mindset, our physical, emotional, and mental health, if we don't pay attention to those things, then we may be faced someday with a diagnosis that changes our life in the worst way possible. And nobody wants to look back and go, if only. So start small, start really, really small, and then just give yourself an opportunity to build a little bit of momentum, let that connect to some motivation, and just keep going. And always come back to your why. Always come back to that hopefulness. And of course, it's not about perfection, man. It's just trying to be a little bit better every day. And if you do that, you lock into the process and the journey, then there's at least a better chance that the end will happen the way that we want it to happen. And the second half of our lives, Mike, will be the best half.
Yeah, beautifully said. And that is what we need in our life. We need to start small. We need to have a reminder each and every day for us to not only accept what we have, but to look at what we can do. Just how you were talking about that commercial where the grandfather wanted to lift his grandchild up to put the star on the tree. We all have that bit of motivation in our life, right? Now, if you don't have a grandchild, you do have your health to look at. And I can't imagine anyone who would just think, 70 years old or at 65 when I retire, I want to feel like crap. Most people don't think that way. Most people want to hit 65 and they want to start the best years of their life. You don't have to wait till 65 to start the best years of your life, especially if it's going to be at the sacrifice of your health. I encourage everyone to check out the work that Al does. It's going to be maybe the starting point for you. It could be the point where you realize that now is the time to take action. And if you are in the mood for reading a book, I think Al has a great book, and he's going to be that author that might be that tipping point for you. That might, just be that wake up call for you. It just changes your whole life. Maybe you have an elderly parent, a grandparent, someone who needs to read that book. Pass that to them, right? Just say, here's a gift. I want you to read this. I want you to talk to me after this book and tell me what you've learned. And that is where we need to be. We learn, we grow, and together we can prosper. I want to thank you so much, Al, for coming on, sharing a little bit of your wisdom with us today, and just having a great conversation.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun for me. I love to share. So I appreciate the opportunity.